All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome to the Dashboard Dojo. Today in the dojo, we're going to talk about setting up and using the multiple currencies module as it relates to reports and dashboards. So really glad that you can join us. If it's your first time here in the dojo, just to share quickly, I lived in Japan for a number of years. I had the pleasure of visiting a number of dojos around the country, and it was really, really interesting. They're almost like sacred grounds for learning. And I just love that this word dojo means a place to learn the way. And, the idea of the dojo is that we can learn from each other with each other. We have about 40 hours of recordings on the Dashboard Dojo website. Our last recording is up on it was on the summer 23 release functionality. So hopefully that's useful to you. So again, welcome. So quick agenda, we'll do quick introductions, talk about our sponsor, and then we'll dive right into techniques and practice. I'll talk about an upcoming training class that I'm teaching, talk about my book, and I will share a special guest that we'll have on the next Dashboard Dojo, our next Masters in the Dojo series guest. So we've got a small group, so please use the chat and ask any questions that you have. We can dig right in. We can also take you off mute if that's helpful to explain something. Really glad that you've joined us today. Oops. So who am I? My name is David Carnes. I'm the chairman and founder of OpFocus. We're a consultancy based out of the Boston area and Toronto areas. I'm also the Boston admin group leader, which has been a lot of fun. And recently I had a chance to speak at Czech Dreamin' and got a picture of this, the astronomical clock in Prague, which is really kind of cool. And if you think, um, I feel like it was the 14th century that this might have started. And you just think, like, we can't even touch this type of visualization in Salesforce, hundreds and hundreds of years later. But it is kind of a cool thing. There were hundreds of people standing, waiting for the next hour for things to chime, and it was really fun to watch the apostles go by across the top. And there's a little skeleton here that you can see, and he's death. He represents death, and the astronomical clock shows the movements of the sun and the moon and stuff like that. So it's quite a lot going on in this. Uh, so our sponsor is OpFocus. We're Kyle Shagnon, the events manager at OpFocus, our host. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us.
Always a pleasure to be here.
So Kyle and I are both at OpFocus. We, as a company, work with SaaS companies to scale their go-to-market operations. So we do a lot of work with revenue operations, the go-to-market tech stack, and of course, Salesforce at the core. So we've been offering Salesforce consulting since 2006, and you can find us at opfocus.com. So what are we going to talk about today? So what is this thing called Salesforce multiple currencies? We'll talk about active and inactive currencies. We'll talk about the impact on reporting. And there's really not a lot of impact on reporting. I think before I picked this as a topic, I thought, there's got to be more to it. And there just really isn't. So I don't want you to jump off the webinar just yet. Um, it is an interesting topic. It's just very sysadmin heavy. So there are three different places within Salesforce where the currencies can be set. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about something called parenthetical currency conversion, which is just on by default these days. It was kind of a cool thing when they introduced it, but now it's just on by default. We'll talk about gotchas. This is the topic. This is probably one of a handful of topics in Salesforce where you really, really should read the fine print before you turn this feature on. You'll hear me say a couple of times, once you turn this on, you can't turn it off. You can try to hide it, but you can't turn it off. And I did have one client once, probably 15 years ago, who sort of went out of his mind. We warned him and said, look, we turn this on, we can't turn it off. And it was one funny reason. I'll explain later why he was unhappy. And it was really funny. It had nothing to do with Salesforce, but I'll tell you about it. So we'll talk about the considerations for enabling multi-currency. There's just stuff to think about, and this gets into like reading the fine print. We'll talk about how to enable it. We'll talk about a feature called advanced currency management, which is a really important thing to understand why that's necessary. we'll also talk about some other currency solutions because this isn't the be all and end all currency solution, and I'll explain why during the session today. So before we get started, I'm curious, maybe we could run a poll. I'm curious what your experience is using Salesforce's multiple currency module. So have you set it up before? Are you a long-time user? Have you dabbled? Never touched it?
Keep this poll up for a couple seconds to give everyone
Okay,
the
we've got a
opportunity to
long-time
answer.
user. Great. Yeah, I think that's perfect, Kyle. So all right, we've got one that set it up. Awesome. So I think this is exactly what I expected, that it'd be kind of across the spectrum. I'll go ahead and close that out. Stop sharing that. I'm assuming it went away, Kyle.
Yep, should
Okay.
be good to go.
So what is this thing that we call the Salesforce multiple currency module? Well, it's an optional module. So you could work with Salesforce for decades and never even know that it exists, not even need to do anything with it. So it's an optional module which supports organizations that need to do things internationally. So OpFocus is 17 years old, probably in our 7th or 8th year. We realized we were starting to do projects internationally, and we needed to turn this module on within our own Salesforce instance. And we needed to create Canadian dollar, British pounds, and Indian rupees as currencies within our org. This allows you to take advantage of more than one currency when working with opportunities. It says forecasts, but you really got to get into the fine print. One help doc says it supports forecasts, and another help doc says it doesn't support forecasts. So I feel like Salesforce has released 3 different editions of the forecast module over time. So we have collaborative forecasts now. I heard at a product meeting that Salesforce is thinking about having that go away and replacing it with another one. So it's funny that it mentions it here, and in another place in help it says it doesn't work with you know what it must be? That must be advanced currency management. Anyway, so this allows us to use more than one currency for opportunities, quotes, things like annual revenue. Basically, one of the data types you can take advantage of when you're building out your Salesforce system is a currency field. And the currency field interacts with this multiple currencies module. One key thing to note is that out of the box, that OOTB, there's no sync. So you kind of assume, and I remember assuming this 15 plus years ago when first touching this, kind of assume that this would just sort of keep the rates up to date. And it doesn't. And it kind of makes sense. You don't necessarily want the rates going all over the place. Oftentimes it'll be driven by a finance person who says, we're going to lock in our rates once a quarter. And or even at OpFocus, I think we lock them in once a year for accounting purposes, and that's good enough for our accounting needs. Now, if your business is very transactional, if you have large volumes of sales internationally every day, you might actually want to update the rates more often. But out of the box, Salesforce doesn't do any of the updating of rates for you. Now, if you don't use multi-currency, you don't even really think about it. You just have one currency. And, when I speak in different countries, I'll usually update the currency locale within the system and pick something like the Moroccan dollars. And I kind of loved that it said MAD in front of all of the dashboard entries and on reports. I kind of thought that was the coolest one, MAD, instead of USD or CAD or JPY or whatever for the different currencies. So when we interact with the multiple currency module on the back end, we can create a list of currencies. I mentioned within OpFocus that we use the Canadian dollar and US dollar, and we used to use the British pound and the rupee. And so those are inactive currencies. And if you're familiar with the current rates, these are wildly off. These are from 6-7 years ago, these conversion rates. We haven't used them, so there's really been no point to updating them. Whereas these are rates, this Canadian rate, we would update probably once a year, something like that. Now, where else do you see currencies on the front end? Well, if you look at a dashboard and if you've enabled the multi-currency thing, one thing to keep in mind is that it basically makes the representation of numbers longer. And I thought to show this gas gauge here because it's ugly. You know, the numbers are essentially 4 characters wider, and they're overlapping with each other here. It sort of looks like a little bit of a mess. And that probably looked fine before multi-currency was enabled. And then multi-currency was enabled and the numbers crossed over. And that's just something to keep in the back of your mind, that if you turn on the multi-currency module, you now have the ISO code for each currency that's prepended to each number and makes the numbers longer. When you're looking at a record in Salesforce, like an account or a lead or an opportunity, you'll see the amount. And then this is what that parenthetical feature. So within parentheses, it shows the conversion to your personal currency. So this particular opportunity is a US dollar opportunity. I was logged in as a European team member, and it converted it to that European team member's preferred currency, which was euros. We can also see on a report that the amount column will show the mixed currencies. So you have CAD for Canadian dollars, then US dollars, and then you have a column to the right of it, which has in parentheses converted, and it's all converted to the currency that you specify while editing the report. And I'll show you that in a little bit. In the olden days, if you were considering turning on multi-currency, you would actually not want to use the amount columns anymore, because the amount column would sum up all the different currencies and get the numbers wrong. And so you'd want to have your dashboards in particular and your reports summed up off of this converted column. I noticed in prepping for today that that's been fixed. It's probably been fixed for a few years now, and I just didn't notice because I just ignored this column anytime we use multi-currency, and I'd do all my math on the converted columns. Is there a question, Kyle?
There is one question. Carol asked, we also have inactive currencies that have not been used for or updated in years. Is there a best practice for currencies that are no longer used? So I believe, is there the option to remove them?
I don't think we can delete them. It's the funniest thing. I can't get the screen to show me the question. And I understand the question. You don't have to repeat it, but I'm like fighting with how stupid. Okay, let's not worry about that.
And another question, is the amount converted field automatically created, or is that something that you must custom add?
Yeah, I'll answer both questions. So the first one, the inactive, there is no delete for old currencies. Once you turn on the multi-currency module, it adds a whole bunch of infrastructure. It's like plumbing in your system. Every record now, every object has a currency field on it. And there's a whole bunch of plumbing related to this. And it's one of the reasons that Salesforce just says, look, we don't want you to delete currencies. You can activate them again, you can edit the currency, but you can't delete it. So that, to my knowledge, you cannot delete them. So to the other question, the amount converted field, this is automatically created for every single currency field in your system. If you go to create a report, there'll be a twin column called the converted column. So great question, Bilal. All right, so these are just a couple different looks for what this looks like in your system. On reports, you've got the amounts column. Just keep in mind that it's going to show you all the currencies mixed together. And in the olden days, that sum would be the sum of all the numbers, but it is fixed now. You see that this 264 is equivalent to the 264 over here. So Salesforce must have modified that during some release over the years. So I'm glad they did. And that converted column, that twin column that Bilal asked about, is driven by the user default. So I'm going to talk about the three places in the system where you define currency. But one of those places is each user has their preferred currency, and that's what drives what appears there. So, so on a report in particular, that is changeable by editing the currency at the bottom right. So when you're working on a report, and specifically when you're editing a report, so this is something that somebody creating or editing a report will do. somebody running a report just sees the converted currency based on the one you've chosen here. So if I choose Canadian dollars, that amount will all convert to Canadian dollars based on the exchange rate set in setup. So this is an important thing when you're reporting. If you create this report and you choose US dollar and you save it, then this summary amount is going to be the 264. And if I source a dashboard with this report, it's going to pull in that 264. If I set this up as Canadian dollar, let's say that the number is 310 or 320, I don't, whatever the math is, then it'll pull in the Canadian dollar amount into the dashboard. So you do want to be very intentional about what you set this as here. And you can see that when I create a record, so this could be on an account, for example, and it is an account because it says account currency. When you go to fill in a currency field, so this is an out-of-the-box currency field called annual revenue, you can specify what the currency is based on the ones that are active in your org. So I know I showed a picture of US dollar and Canadian dollar. This is from another org that has euro, British pound, and US dollar set up. So I can choose any of those three as the active currency for that account. So I mentioned that there are currencies in three levels in Salesforce, and I thought to just give this as an example. So there's the system default. This is your corporate currency. And without multi-currency, whatever your corporate currency, when you're not using the multi-currency module, the currency is all the same. So if it's Canadian dollars, it's Canadian dollars for all users and it's Canadian dollars for all records. However, if you turn on multi-currency and if your corporate currency is Canadian dollar, you could have a user whose default currency is the Japanese yen. And if they go create an opportunity or they create an account, the default currency of those records will be the user's default currency. But it doesn't have to be that way. So you could also have the situation where we're working for a Canadian company. We have Sally, sales rep, who's based in Tokyo. She normally sells in yen, but she's covering for somebody's paternity leave and selling a deal in Australia, and it's an Australian dollar deal. So there's three levels to think about: the system default currency, the user default currency, and then at the record level. Back when I took the admin exam 100 years ago, that was a question: what are the three levels where currencies appear? But you can see here the three images here that under setup, we can manage the currencies. So this org has euros, pounds, and dollars. And you can see the corporate currency is set by a check mark. And if you want to change that, you just go up and change the corporate currency. And then on a user record, this is from the user screen. When I edit it, I can change a user. So Sally, sales rep, I might set hers to Japanese yen, but it would first have to be set up over here in order to be selectable for that user. And then when I go create an account, you can see what the currency is. There's a field. So basically every record forevermore on every object will pretty much have a currency field forevermore once you turn this on. All right. So I mentioned the parenthetical currency conversion. All that means is that they put the conversion amount in parentheses. So this is enabled by default. It displays the converted currency amounts to users whose personal currency is different from the record that they're viewing. So I was looking at a euro account as a US dollar default currency user, and this is what I see. So what I thought we'd do is actually log into an org, look at it a few different ways, and then look at it as a user who uses a different currency, and we'll see the numbers change. So let's go do that. I've got two more quick slides. So let's take a look at one org setup. So this already has some currencies set up. So our organization recently started using multiple currencies, and we've set up US dollars, euros, and British pounds. So let's go explore how is it currently configured. Let's update an exchange rate. Let's add ourselves. Let's look as ourselves, and we'll look as Julie Chavez. We'll create a new account. We'll run and edit a report. We'll view on a dashboard. We'll just look at different ways at this. So So starting in the system, this org has multi-currency turned on. And, oh wait, this org does not have it turned on, which is the one that I had. Okay, this must be the one that has it on. I think I'm going crazy. Okay, this is the org that has it on. Okay, here we go. So I can tell that it's been set up as an admin. I can go under setup and I can scroll down to under company settings. If I see manage currencies, that's a giveaway that this is actually turned on. The place to turn it on is on the company information page. And it's just a checkbox to turn it on. Back in the olden days, we used to have to submit a ticket to Salesforce and they would turn it on for us. At some point in the last 10 years, they've given us the checkbox so you can just turn it on for yourself. Just remember, you can't turn it off. So you want to think about it, try it out in a sandbox or a dev org first. So once you check that box and turn it on, whatever currency was set as the currency locale becomes the default currency. And we can now manage that and add other currencies under this new link that appears called Manage Currencies. And if we look in here, we have active currencies and we can edit them. And this is how we would edit the rates, and we can deactivate them. We can also add new currencies. We can click edit rates to edit multiple rates at the same time. That's kind of handy. So once the rates are set up here, then we can go use them. So for example, I'm looking at an account and my user is a US dollar user. This account is called EuroCorp, and it is set with the currency euros at 1 billion euros. And because I'm a US dollar user, I'm seeing this USD 1.08 billion in parentheses. Now, similarly, when I go look at a report, so I've got a report here called Open Opportunities with Close Date. I've got the amount column here, and I've got the amount column converted. And if I scroll down in this, I can see that, and I've just highlighted them using the simple search feature, but I've got $100 euro opportunity and $1 million euro opportunity. And I can see the US dollar converted amount. So when you're creating a report, when multi-currency is enabled, you, the report writer, can choose what currency is used. And it's just off the screen here. Actually, that's not what I want. So if I, this is a report that's been run. Let's go ahead and edit the report. And you see down here, down in the bottom right-hand corner, hopefully it's visible on your screens, there's a tiny little, the word currency, and it shows in bold USD. Now I could change this now and change it to the British pound, and it would just depend on the exchange rates that I've set. But all these two converted columns will become set for a British pound. So that's for the amount column, and I have the expected revenue column, which is also converted. There's a twin field. Now, I don't have to show the converted amount. Maybe I don't really care for expected revenue. I could just hide that column if I want. If you go to create a new report, the converted columns don't appear on their own. You have to just come and look for them. So if I search on the word converted, I can see that there are those two columns, and I can easily add them just like any other column to my report. Typically, I'll put them side by side with whatever the twin, just makes it easier to look at. But if you scroll down, the one that is the original one will have the mixed currencies. So you can see the euros and dollars mixed together here. So that's kind of it with reporting, because what appears on a dashboard is driven by what's sourced here. So if I were to go ahead and save this, now the next time somebody runs this, it's going to be in British pounds. So you might, if you have a team selling in Canada or selling in Europe, you could add additional versions with the local currency conversions, additional versions of reports, if that's helpful.
David, before we move on, there are two questions that just came in.
Okay.
The first is, can you go over the search field in the report that let you highlight euro?
Okay. Yep. I'll absolutely show that. And it's a feature that was added in the last couple of years. Uh,
Oh,
so, and is there another question?
oh, yeah. If a currency is deactivated, what happens to records using that currency? Any fine print things to be concerned with?
Yeah, there's a ton of fine print. I'm going to get to the fine print. So there's a
Okay.
lot of it. There's a lot of it to think about. So let me show you the search feature. So this is available in any report, and you can click on this and you could search for Dennis, let's say, and it'll highlight the word Dennis. So I have opportunity for Dennis 260, and I forgot there was a guy named Dennis Howard. So it's basically lets you cycle through and highlight the one. I just happened to search, and I was curious if it would find the prepended ISO code, and it does. So I instead of scrolling through this whole, it's not that long of a list, but I knew there were euros in here somewhere, so that's why I highlighted them that way. It just made my life easier. So the search is available to you, and it highlights whatever text that you enter, which is kind of nice. All right. So we've just looked at a few different things. So why don't we let's look at a dashboard, and then let's log in as Julie Chavez, and let's just see how things work a little differently for Julie. So let's come back over here. I guess the one other thing I wanted to show you was just looking at a dashboard. And do you see how all the numbers are prepended with USD, USD, USD? And if I came in here, did I save that report? Let's actually check that out. It'll be interesting to just prove one other use case here. So did I save this as British pounds? I did. So let's actually add this report to this dashboard, and we'll see a mix of currencies on here. So let's just come in here. We're going to add a component, and I only have one recent report in this org. And it's not a grouped report, so the only thing it'll let me do is a table. That's why the rest of these are grayed out. That's fine. And let's show both columns. I think this is fine. Let's show the total and see what happens with that. Let's make it with 2 decimals just because I'm curious. And this has, let's do the top 10. So this isn't the tallest thing ever. All right, so I've just changed this dashboard, and you come down here, and why don't we make this one a little wider so we can actually see. So this is basically everything else on this dashboard is in US dollars, except this table, which has the mix of US dollars and euros, and then it has British pounds because that's the converted amount saved in the source report. So there's really nothing we can do on a dashboard other than pick which reports are coming in. There's nothing that we can do specifically that controls currencies other than which source report we pick. All right. So I'm a US dollar user. Let's go create an account. We'll just see that the default currency is US dollar, and you see that here. Why don't we go log in as Julie Chavez? And let's just look. I'll just show you her individual user has the euro as the currency. And if we go back and we log in as her, so this is a sysadmin thing that can be enabled in your org, that you can log in as other users, just makes your life easier. So what I might do is come in here, click new, and let's call this Best Corp. And you see I'm logged in as Julie. Her base currency is euros. So the default currency, but I can override it because I have other ones here. So why don't I go ahead and do that? I'll set that as the British pound, and I'll say it's $2 million. Did you guys know that you could just hit the letter M or the letter B, or I could do 2.5 and hit the letter M, and it just blasts out all the zeros? It's kind of handy. That works with KBP. Sorry, KMB for thousands, millions, billions. kind of a handy little thing. And you see here that because I'm Julie Chavez, I just created a British pound account, but in the parenthetical currency, it shows me as euros. So here, this should sort of blow our mind. Let's actually go run that same report. And that same report is showing me British pounds, even though my default currency is euros logged in as Julie. It's showing me British pounds because that's what whoever created the report, that's what they set it as. So it's important to know these little nuances here and that thing about the 3 levels. So there's a system default, like a corporate currency, there's a user default currency, and then at the record level, there's the record currency. And it's just important to get that straight. All right. And if we looking as Julie, I think I shared, yes, I did, the dashboard. And once again, we're going to see it in US dollars. You can see the USD here and the USD here because the source report was set as US dollars. This isn't, of course, the one that I did. Did I even save it? I might not have saved that change to see. Well, anyways, doesn't really matter. Let's keep going. All right. So what are the gotchas with multiple currencies? Well, all converted amounts are based on the current rate. So hopefully nobody dropped off the call before my saying this. Like it is such an important thing to wrap your head around, that the exchange rate that's set in setup is the current rate. So you might have an opportunity from 5 years ago, and this is the Canadian exchange rate for the last 10 years. This is wild, like wildly different, right? When we first started working and selling into Canada, the exchange rate was almost at parity. So $1 equaled one US dollar equaled one Canadian dollar. And look at this. Within 2 years, the Canadian dollar had plummeted to being, so one US dollar was worth 1.45 Canadian dollars. Like it's just like a massive, massive change. And you almost can't run the business that way. It's just like, there's just too much fluctuation, and you have to kind of draw a line in the sand. And this is one problem with the out of the box multi-currency, that there's no fixed rates based on dates. So there's another feature to support that, but it only supports opportunities. Okay. So if you turn on multi-currency, you're only setting today's exchange rate. If you look at an opportunity from 10 years ago, it's looking at those amounts with today's rates, and that may completely change the equation. The other thing to know about the multi-currency modules, somebody actually has to go update the rates. So unless you figure out a way to do a mass update of rates, or you have an API connection, if you short of all those things, you're going to have a human go update the rates. You really do want to read the fine print and help, and I'll show some of those articles and just talk to you about. So there are considerations with roll-up summary fields. There are just other types of considerations. Some modules things work, some modules things are not supported. So multiple currencies module is available in all Salesforce editions. It has to be enabled by a sysadmin. Once it's turned on, it can't be turned off. So this client from about 15 years ago really loved pulling everything into Excel. So we set him up so that his amounts are being exported to Excel, and he could play with them there. When we turned on multi-currency and we talked about this, look, it can't be shut off. All the amounts suddenly had these prepended text in front of them. And when he pulled it into Excel, it's essentially text, because anything that starts with letters like CAD is interpreted as text. It's not a number. Suddenly his Excel files broke because he couldn't sum things up. And it was just kind of comical. So we talked about currencies can be made inactive. The currency fields can also be removed from layouts. There's a couple of other interesting scenarios that you could turn on multi-currency, enable it for one currency. And you can, if you use one currency, I found somewhere in the fine print and help, if you only have one active currency, you could change the symbol that appears. I thought the symbols were controlled by your locale, but there was something in the fine print of changing the symbol. Like if you didn't want a dollar symbol and you wanted a yen symbol, but that's something you just should dig into the help. I would also just try this out in a sandbox or a dev org. Absolutely do that before trying it in production. So I mentioned that all converted amounts rely on the current conversion rates. And this is except when using advanced currency management. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Depending on the finance needs, the accounting needs of your organization, you might set the rates monthly, you might set them quarterly, you might set them once a year. Here's one of the things in fine print, that field-to-field filters on reports. If you turn on multi-currency, it no longer supports currency fields. So that's one feature that falls off. There are others that are listed in the fine print. So let's talk about how to turn this on. And I'll just stop for a second and see if there are any questions. Doesn't look like it. Okay. So let's talk about how to turn this on. So it's pretty simple. There's a checkbox. It requires a sysadmin. So let's say that our new leadership team has decided that this is the year to start selling into Canada and the UK. So let's enable multi-currency and add exchange rates from both countries. So we're going to go into setup. We're going to put on our sysadmin hat. We're going to activate multiple currencies, which is a checkbox. And then we're going to, oh, this is interesting. One little note here. Whatever your currency locale before you turn this on, that becomes the corporate currency when you first start out. So we'll see that in action. I think I've got this over here. Let's see. I'm getting the orgs mixed up. I think it's this one. Yes, it's this one. Okay, good. All right, so I'm under setup. And if I edit the setup page, and I think this said we're going to sell into Canada and the UK. So let's just assume it's US dollars is our currency locale. That's going to become our current corporate currency. And if I go ahead and click on this, anytime as a sysadmin, anytime you see yellow boxes, think of yellow snow, right? You wouldn't eat yellow snow, right? Yuck. It's like a warning. Anytime you see a yellow box in setup, it means you really should go read the help. In this case, you should go read the help, because there's a whole bunch of implications on turning this on, other features that may not work the way you think they do. So let's go ahead and we'll check the box and we'll click save, which is of course hidden by one of 3,000 Zoom windows. Okay, so now that we've turned this on, if I reload the browser page, we're going to have manage currencies show up here in this list. So if I scroll back down, now there's manage currencies. And what I would probably do is decide what rate, and this is something you decide with your accounting team. I'll take today's rates. So there's a site xe.com. It's one of many that has current exchange rates. And we can see that this is set as the Canadian dollar. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. So it's the US dollar is 1.3277 to the Canadian dollar. So if I come in here and add a new currency rate and the currency type, and this is a long list, it's alphabetized by the currency code. And you've got the Botswana pula and the Belarusian ruble and the Swiss franc and so on. So if I go ahead and choose Canadian dollar, I'll put the rate in here and you just decide the decimal places for that currency. So I'm going to go ahead and click save and new. We're going to add one more. Let's do the British pound. And that's GBP. And so over here, the British pound is 78784. So it's got 5 decimals. And let's leave it with 2 decimal places once we save that. So this is now ready to go. This is sort of all we need to do sort of out of the box to get started. There is this advanced currency management. I'll talk about it in just a minute. But we can actually just go use this now in this org. So if I come back up here and if I go to create a new account, when I go to create the new account, I think I'm going crazy. So what we should see is the currency field in here. I think what I didn't give it the chance to do. I think I have to clear the cache, just refresh the browser. And let's see if I see that. There it is. Okay, so I was going crazy temporarily, but you can see here the three currencies that we've just enabled. So I can make this a Canadian dollar account. And I'll say that this is 1.2, the letter B, and it just punches out all the zeros for me. And this is my Canuck Corp account. I'll go ahead and save that. And if we come back to the details, we can see, so because our corporate currency was US dollars, and we just turned this on, I haven't gone back to my user to change my own currency. It assumes that my currency is US dollars, and that's why we see the US dollar conversion in here. All right, so that's a lot of stuff. And again, if we came in here and created a report, I just happened to, it's like Julia Child's. I already had the pot boiling over here. I already created a report that we could look at. And this one I don't have any multi-currency opportunities yet, but if I came in here and created one, we could see it in here. If I edit the report, I could now, because we've turned on multi-currency, I do have this in the bottom right-hand corner, and I could look at this in British pounds immediately. I'd have to go run the report. And I'm not showing the converted. That's funny. It would be helpful to show the converted column. So that's the other thing. If you do want to turn this on, I was just testing you guys, see if anybody was paying attention. So let's throw that one there. Let's go ahead and run it. And here it is, because I've changed this report to British pounds. Now, if I saved it and I called this report on a dashboard, it would show in British pounds. So don't let anybody tell you that this takes months and months to set up. There are things to think about, and you may need to think about the data in your org and all the users and who should be assigned what currencies. You may have to update data as well, because if you're suddenly changing currencies of records, you might want to change the numbers that are in those fields as well. Okay, so we've just played with these things. I'll pull up to see if there are any questions. All right, so advanced currency management. This is another feature that has to be enabled by a sysadmin, and this allows for the tracking of historical exchange rates by a particular date range, and this supports opportunities. So the conversion rate is based on the close date on the opportunity and a date range that you've defined. So here's some of the fine print. It says dated exchange rates are used for opportunities, opportunity products, opportunity product schedules, campaign opportunity fields, opportunity splits, and reports related to these objects. However, dated exchange rates are not used in forecasting. So typically with forecasting, you're looking ahead at the future, but you can look back in time, and it's not going to use the dated rates. It's going to use today's rates. And this is one sort of caveat. One of the things you need to think about, you kind of have to triangulate, how are you currently using the system? How do you want to use the system? And can you put up with the things that aren't supported? There are some other considerations like roll-up summary fields. Some roll-up summary fields are supported, but not all. So you want to sort of dig into what that means, and that's in the help. So it's just a button to enable, and then you go define dated exchange rates. So let's actually just take a quick look at this. I've got this org that we were just playing with. Let's come right back in here under setup, and let's go just turn this on. So if we enable an advanced currency and says, look, you're about to do this. Remember the yellow snow. Don't eat the yellow snow. Yes, I want to do this. Are you sure? So it says blah, blah, blah. They're not applied to fields on other objects or when forecasting. Roll-up summary fields are affected by advanced currency management. Delete any currency roll-up summary fields on accounts that summarize opportunities. It's basically, there's stuff you can't do anymore. So at the OpFocus system, I don't know that we use this because we have roll-up summary fields that we'd like on our accounts. So that tells me that we're probably not using advanced currency management for OpFocus. But I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. I'm in my dev work, and I can disable it. And now I have this new gray section here, which says manage dated exchange rates. So I can come in here, and there's a nice picture of some currency. That's very exciting. So I could say, don't show this again. So what I can do is I can come in and say new exchange rates, and you're basically saying when the date starts. So let's say that just magically on July 14th or later, June 14th, I want these rates to appear. Or I can go back in time and I could say, you know what, for the start date of 1/1/2022, the exchange rate was, for the Canadian dollar, it was 1.25 is what we agreed to. And for the British pound, it was 0.85, something like that. And if I go ahead and save that, now when I go run an opportunity report, it'll be based on the close date of the opportunity, which exchange rates are being used. So this is not the best screen in the world that we can look at previous ranges. And it says for anything before 12/31/2021, these are the rates. And then as of, this is before. So it looks like what I had defined. No, where did my other rates go? This page is, oh, here it is. Okay, all right. So I went, anyway, there's previous and there's next. So here it is. Starting on 1/1, it switches to these, and then there is no other range. So I could set another one for 1/1/23. And let's say on 1/1/2023, we came in here and it was 1.35, and it was, let's say it was 875. So I probably should have made these numbers a little wildly different to really emphasize it. But if we come back to a report like this, depending on the close dates, these numbers will change. So of course I remove the close date column from this report. Let's throw it back on. And sort of depending on the close dates, if I kept track of them, and you see that these are all 2023. Oh, of course, it's set to the current quarter. That's why the filter on the report. But if we come back in here and set it to all time, set that to all time. And let's just show any status. Now, what I could do to make my life easier is just show a bunch of opportunities that are $1 million opportunities for US dollars. And then I could see the exchange rates being applied for the different time based on these close dates. Because here's a deal for 1/1/23. And if I had one, okay, here's one for 2022. And if I did the math, it would be different for this one than it would be for this one. And that would be different than this one based on the close dates over here. So is there a question?
Yeah, one question came in. If there are 3 currencies and one currency is deactivated, what happens if what if anything happens to records using the deactivated currency?
So my understanding, Carol, it's a great question. My understanding is that the currency is still visible on reports, still visible on records. You just can't you can't set new records to that currency. So if you need a clean system, you have to go do data updates, and you could use the data loader for that, or maybe do inline editing within an opportunity list view, or whatever record it is, whatever type of record. But I believe that the data stays in there with the old currency exchange rate until you change the currency to a current currency, but you can't add any new records. All right, so there are other solutions on the App Exchange. There's a bunch of them, and these, a lot of these are like live currency converter, currency manager, and updater. They're just there to make your life easier and solve the problem. Maybe do updates on some. You might be buying a data stream that, like from an xe.com, and bringing the data in. It might update it on some interval that you want. As a consulting firm, we've built out custom currency management solutions. Just because this out of the box stuff, it doesn't really go as far as what a lot of companies need. But you do have third-party solutions available, and hopefully there's something that goes as far as you need it to go if the out-of-the-box one doesn't. And I mentioned that there are quite a few files in help. If you just search on the word multiple currencies in help, you have enable multiple currencies, importing multiple currencies, tips for filtering, because there are some cool things. When I wrote a couple pages in my book on multi-currencies, one of the things I didn't realize is that you can write a filter, and you can include the currency ISO code in the filter, and it's smart enough to manage that. So you could say annual revenue greater than USD, whatever that number is, 5 million, 50 million, whatever the number is. You can include the currency ISO code. That's one of the things you can do filtering wise. So there's just a whole bunch of these. I would read all of them before setting down the path to turn this on. This is absolutely something you're going to want to play within a sandbox and decide if it works for you. Do that well before you ever turn it on in production. There may be features that you don't realize will break if you turn this on. Now, this is a group called Dashboard Dōjō. We talk about reporting. We didn't really talk a lot about reporting today because there really isn't that much with reporting. You have that feature down in the bottom right-hand corner, and whatever you save that as, that's what gets pulled through to the dashboard. So that it's the report, kind of as always, which dictates what goes on in the dashboard, but there isn't anything specific on the dashboard unless I'm missing something. There might be, with filtering, there might be an implication to dashboard filters that I haven't dug up yet, but otherwise, that's what we've got. So we've talked about a whole bunch of things, not a lot about reports and dashboards today, but this is one of those foundational things that once you have this set up and in place, then you can do reporting and run your business. We talked about active and inactive, the impacts on reporting, the 3 levels of currency, which was an exam question 100 years ago, an admin exam question. There's just a lot of gotchas. You definitely want to think this through, try it out before playing with it. I did mention my book. It's literally, I got the email this morning. It's off to the printers, which is super exciting. So the ebook will be available in the next few days, and the physical book will be available the first week of July. It was one of the most exciting moments of my life. I think the birth of the kids was better, but seeing the book on Amazon was pretty sweet. I am teaching a class coming up. It's a 2-day hands-on report and dashboard workshop. It's July 12th and 13th. It's open to our clients and anyone else that is interested in that. And I mentioned earlier, we have Steve Moe will be joining us on June 28th for the Masters in the Dōjō series. So hopefully you can join us for that. Any other questions?
Yes, one more came in. Can the converted amount fields be used in formulas?
Oh, it's a really good question. Let's actually just go take a look. It's funny. I want to give a hunch of an answer, but then I'm sort of hesitant to give a hunch of an answer. Let's actually just go try it out. So you said formula. So used in formula. So Actually, you know what? I'm going to log out of Julie Chavez and log back in as myself. I don't know if you saw that was Dōjō underscore MC1, and I had it Dōjō underscore MC2 for today. Set up a lot of DevWorks. No, I was supposed to log out as her. That was weird. How did I do that? Okay, all right, we're back. So let's go to, I created an app called Reporting. Let's go to the Reports tab. So I want to check two places. I'm gonna make, you know, actually I should probably not make an assumption. All right, so if we just come and add a row level formula, let's see what we get. So if I scroll down here, I do have the amount converted available to me. So that's on a report. Let's group the report and let's see, and do we have them available in a summary formula, which means we would have it available in a cross-block formula. So here's amount converted is there. There's one other place I want to check for Carol's question, which is when you create a formula field. So if I go to the object manager and let's say I'm on an account, fields and relationships. So I've got my sysadmin hat on. I want to create a new field in the system. So I'm going to create a formula field. We'll give it a name. We'll call it test. And this is going to be a currency field with two decimals. That's, you know, one other thing to consider is how many decimals do you want? Okay, so I probably would never use the simple formula tab. I'll always use the advanced formula tab. One reason is you get this nice insert field button. And what if I scroll down here? I'm not seeing annual revenue converted. So this may help me make up my mind to Carol's question about where am I going to put a field? Like, where am I going to write a formula? I might lean toward using a row level formula or a summary formula on a report as opposed to using a custom formula field, because I'm not seeing the exchange information here. I'm not seeing that amount converted. Awesome. Okay, well, guys, thank you so much. Kyle, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I didn't see, were there any other questions?
No, I believe that was the last one.
Okay, guys, I hope you can join us on June 28th. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, everyone.